Hey there, in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you how to convert your spouse's visitor visa to open work permit in 1 day through the process called flagpoling. I'm going to share my experience with you as well as tips and tricks to avoid making the mistakes that I made on this journey. Feel free to grab your popcorn and drink while we delve right into it in few seconds. Welcome to my channel. My name is Hamida and I'm a Nigerian YouTuber based in Toronto, Canada. On my channel, you find videos on lifestyle, i.e. living in Canada, vlogs, and also a couple of story times. If you are new here, hey guy, hey girl, welcome to my channel. Please consider subscribing down below to join this beautiful family. If you are an existing subscriber, thank you so much for always coming back to watch my videos. Without further ado, let's delve right into today's video. So I know that you've applied for a spousal sponsorship and your spouse is waiting, back home or wherever they are, waiting for your application to be approved before they join you. By the end of this video, you see reasons as to why your spouse can come to Canada ASAP. There's no need to wait for your application to be finalized before your spouse comes to Canada. Okay, so first of all, I understand the skepticism regarding the fact that you don't want your spouse to come to Canada as under the guise of a visitor visa because they won't be able to work to support you. And yeah, that's valid. Nobody wants to be a burden. However, as of today, dated August 10th of 2023, there's a policy that has been in place since May that allows your spouse to get 30 days expedited visitor visa and access to apply to an open work permit. In the past, people that have spousal sponsorship applications hardly get open work permit approved, because they already have a permanent resident application in view. But as of right now, due to this policy, which is temporary, I must add, you are able to, get your application approved in 30 days and also convert to open work permit when your spouse gets to Canada, and everybody's gonna live happily ever after. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you a bit of backstory. Okay, I applied for the visitor visa for my husband like almost immediately after we got married, and 9 months down the line, I was tired of waiting for the visitor visa and I decided to apply for the spousal sponsorship. And of course, the ETA for that is, as of right now, 18 months. And of course, that was going to take a longer time. But for me, it was a case of whichever comes through on time. Thankfully, while we were waiting for his visitor visa to be approved, actually any of them to be approved, a new policy was introduced stating that you are allowed to bring in your spouse into Canada, provided that you have passed through the first stage of approval, meaning you have gotten an acknowledgement of receipt. So typically a sponsorship application, it will take like 6 weeks to 8 weeks to get AOR, meaning acknowledgement of receipt. Okay, so the clause to this policy is that you must have gotten first stage of approval, right? So then you can invite your spouse to Canada, temporarily using the visitor visa. It's going to be approved in 30 days expedited, and you can then apply for an open work permit for the spouse while the spousal sponsorship application is being approved. In a nutshell, that's what the policy is about. The immigration minister at that time, Sean Fraser, wanted to prioritize, reuniting families and, bringing families together, and was prioritizing that. And so we had the temporary policy. As of right now, the policy is still in place. Depending on when you're watching this video, please make sure to do your findings to make sure that this policy is still in place. Okay, so now I'm going to go right into the process of flag polling and the reason behind flag polling. Okay, so thankfully for us, our visitor visa got approved, right, and my husband got in here, you know, using the visitor visa. And of course I went ahead to apply for an open work permit few days after he landed. So ideally for work permits applied online, the ETA is about 150 days. That's like 5 months, right? And anybody that knows IRCC knows that these guys don't ever follow timeline. It can come earlier and it can come later. So at the end of the day, you know, I mean, it just didn't make sense to gamble. Thankfully I put a call through to a friend and he has a wife in the same category, and you know, they told me they were going to Flagpole. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of flag polling, which is completely legal, by the way. Essentially flag polling is a process whereby you go to the border, meaning here the border between Canada and the US, and you attempt to get back into Canada and then change your status, right? So people typically use flag polling to change from student permit to postgraduate work permit, from visitor visa to open work permit. As a matter of fact, you can also go there to do your soft landing as a permanent resident. So for example, if you come into Canada and forget to sign your COPR, best believe it happened to somebody I know, and you need your COPR signed, you go to the border and they are going to sign it for you. Also, if you've applied for a work permit and it hasn't, you know, been approved, or basically it has been approved, pardon me, and you haven't gotten it in your mail or something and you need it ASAP, you can go to the border and they're going to print it for you. This entire process is called flag polling, right? And you know, the popular category of people that use flag polling are the students. So essentially spouses of students that come in with visitor visa because it's faster than waiting for their spouse's open work permit. So once their spouse comes in as a visitor, they then go to the border to Flagpole and convert to open work permit. So essentially, when we wanted to go on this journey, I went on YouTube, and most of, actually 99% of the videos on YouTube that I came across were talking about students that were changing their status from visitor visa, their spouses changing from visitor visa to, you know, work permit, and also students changing from student visa to postgraduate work permit. And that wasn't my category at all, right? We were people that had spousal sponsorship applications and wanted to, you know, switch our status based on that. And there was no video on that. And so I thought to document the entire journey and also explain the process to people that are in the same category, okay? So essentially, okay, so this is gonna be a two-part video. So towards the end of the video, there's going to be some sort of mini documentary, because I took a couple of videos on our way to the border to show you what the process looks like, to show you what the place looks like, and you know, basically so that you will see something familiar whenever you decide to do this. So I just did a voiceover on that video log, so you're gonna see that at the end of this video. Make sure to watch till the end. Okay, so now I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty of, you know, my experience. So we left the house at about 3 a.m. because we had been told that you know, you need to get to the border on time. Canada border opens at 8 a.m. right? And so because CBSA, which is the Canadian Border Service Agency, I think, processing application is not their KPI 100%, but then they still do it at the border, right? Processing application is strictly IRCC's forte, right? But then when you get to the border, they can also do that for you. So because of that, they have a quota per day. So we went to the border at Rainbow Bridge in Niagra Falls. So we've heard that the quota per day is usually 5 to 10 people. So the idea was to get there early enough to be amongst the 5 or 10 people that they were going to work on flagpoling for the day. Okay, so we plan to get there early, like say we left the house at about 3:30. We got to the border, US border, at 5 a.m. All right, so on getting to the US border, they took our passports and then they asked us to sit. So while we were sitting, we were getting, anxious, like, okay, we've seen people coming in, in the bus and they've been attended to and they've left. Why were we still sitting? And then one of the agents came to say, look, you have two options. It's either I give you your flagpoling paper and you get to Canada and they tear it, or you sit here and wait till 7:45. I give you your flagpoling paper and you go to the Canadian border at 8 o'clock, okay? Because apparently if you get there too early, the Canadian border service agents are going to rip off your flagpoling paper because, it's no longer valid at that time and they are not resumed, right? So, obviously we opted to sit in there in the US border and wait till 7:45, okay? So we were seated there, they took our biometrics. It's the US, they like to take your data. So they took our biometrics, they took our fingerprints, and we sat down there waiting till 7:45. At about 6:30, we saw a couple of people coming in, and apparently they said that they had been there since 3:30 a.m. They had been at the border since 3:30. So they got their flagpoling paper, they got to the Canadian border, and they sent them back. So that was essentially what the officer was trying to tell us, like, if you get there too early, you're going to have to come back here. Okay, so we sat down there when it was 7:45. He told us to come with him. He gave us our flagpoling paper. He followed us to the gate and then pointed us in the direction of Canada. So we got into the gate and then we drove all the way to Canada, okay? So it's important to also note that there are two categories of people. You can either, maybe for example, take an Uber and walk from the US border to the Canadian border, or you can drive into the US border, you park your car in there, you do all your paperwork and then drive to the Canadian border, okay? So we drove to the Canadian border. So if you were to walk, you go through a different path. So the documentary that I'm going to show you at the end is going to show you the path for those that are driving, okay? So now getting back to the process. So after you get your flagpoling paper and get to the Canadian border agents, they're going to ask you what you want to do, where are you going to, and then you tell them you are flagpoling. And that's exactly the same thing you're going to tell the US border the moment you drive into the border and they ask you what do you want. Say that you are there to flagpole. So immediately it doesn't affect your US visa. It's not a US visa refusal, it's not on your record. You are just there to flagpole, meaning you are just passing through. Okay, so do not be afraid. So when you get to the US border, this is what I should have said earlier. Once you get to the US border, like you drive into the border, they ask you what are you there for. You say flagpoling. They already know what that is. They will give you a white paper, which is a flagpoling paper, which you are then going to take to the Canadian borders, meaning you're going back to Canada. You're not going to the US, okay? So when you get to the Canadian border, you're going to meet the agents there as well, and they're going to ask you what you're there for, and you're going to say you are there to flagpole. And she did ask us a couple of questions, which was, most of our comments were, slightly unprofessional, but hey, I'm sharing all the juice, so I'll tell you. So we got there and she's like, what are you here to do? We're like, okay, we want to convert temporary, visa to work permit. I'm a PR, this is my husband, he's a PR, this is his wife. And she goes, oh no, you cannot do it. And we're like, oh, why? She was like, you are not able to do it. Bear in mind that at that time, both families have applied for an open work permit online. We're only going to Flagpole to expedite the process, because flagpoling means you get your decision right there and then. And so she said to us, oh no, you cannot do it. Does that mean that you lied when you were coming into Canada as a visitor? All of that, remarks, but don't let that bother you. You didn't do anything illegal. As long as you came in as a visitor visa and you satisfied the requirement for a visitor visa, meaning that you had your return tickets and your intentions were clear, it doesn't matter, okay? And your visitor visa is valid for 6 months at a go. So whatever happens, you cannot be deported because your status is still valid and you didn't do anything wrong, okay? So make sure you stand your ground. So she's like, oh no, you can't do it, but regardless, I'm gonna send you to the immigration, to the border agents in charge of immigration. And so we said, okay. So we got in, she gave us a yellow paper, which to be honest, we didn't even have a time to read because she just folded it and put in our passports. And the moment we parked inside, we came down and there was another agent standing right by the door to collect our passports. So we didn't even have a time to glance through whatever she wrote in the yellow paper, okay? So the agent took it inside and told us to sit in a waiting area. So we sat at the waiting area and then we were being called upon. So the lady called up to us and she's like, what are you here for today? What can I help you with? And we're like, okay, we came here to Flagpole and these are our spouses and they want to change their visitor visa to an open work permit. And all hell broke loose because the lady said we couldn't do it, okay? So, and our reason for that was that we had applied online. So she's like, if you have applied online, you need to wait for IRCC to give you your reply online, meaning wait for them to finalize online. We cannot do it. And we were like, oh no, but like it's flag polling and we're able to. There's this policy. As a matter of fact, I was showing her the policy on my phone, but she wasn't going to look at it. She was just like, you cannot, because you already have an online application, you cannot change. Now, 2 key takeaways, okay? You can go to the border without having an online open work permit application. Because we did ask her in the heat of everything that, are you trying to tell us that if we had come here without an open work permit application online, you would approve? And she goes, yeah, well, based on my discretion, you're going to have to fulfill particular requirements. And if you do, I'm going to be inclined to approve. All right. So it means that you can actually, before you apply online, you should go to the border, right? That's if you want it ASAP, okay? You go to the border and tell them you want to change from temporary to open work permit. And here are the documents that she said she was going to need. So she said she would have needed to see, obviously, your marriage certificate. She was going to need to see your resume. I would advise that you probably go with all your documents. She was going to need to see your educational background. So I'm sure she's asking for your university certificate or whatever, if you have it. And then she was also going to need to see your spousal approval, your first stage approval. So the email you get for your AOR or the spousal approval that you get after your AOR, you're going to need to go there with that as well. So if she has seen all of these documents, as well as the documents required to submit an online work permit, which is your digital passport, okay, your international passport, your medicals, if you have done medicals, please go there with the medicals, even though she didn't ask us. But yeah, feel free to go there with your medicals. I think those were like the only 4 documents that we submitted for the online application. So you go with all those documents that you would have needed for online application and you just might get it approved at the border, okay? Because that's what we gathered. So back to our story. So we were like, okay, so how about we cancel our online application and have a fresh application here? She was still insistent on the fact that, but you submitted online though. You have to wait for your application to be approved online. At some point I'd given up, like, let's just go. But the other family that I went with, my friend, was very, hesitant to leave. He kept on telling the lady, I am not convinced. I am not convinced that you cannot do it. I am not convinced that, you are not authorized to do it. essentially, because that's what she was telling us. They are not able to do it. But meanwhile, according to the policy by the immigration minister, you should be able to do it. And you know the good thing about Canada though, like all of their policies are online. Okay, I was showing her and she didn't check eventually. So there was one guy that was sitting beside her, who was also an agent, and he had to ask what was going on, because obviously voices were being raised and all of that. And he said, you know what, guys, oh no, you cannot do it. If you had your application approved and you wanted us to print it out for you, sure, we can do that, but we cannot convert due to your spouse being a permanent resident and all of that. So he did say that he was going to give us a proof. Essentially, he was going to print out something for us to show us that they are not able to approve. And so we said, okay, bring it on. Bring your proof. And then we sat right there, because like I said, my friend kept on saying that he was not convinced. And then after a while, they came up to us and said, oh, and then we should come. And then we got there and she was like, oh, she was asking me, how did you meet your husband? Where did you guys meet? And then she told the other family to take a seat while she attends to us. And then she was like, oh, apparently there's a new policy, you guys knew that, and that's why you came. We didn't know, but now we know that, so we're going to be able to obviously convert it for you after I ask you some questions. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, feel free. And then she asked, how we met, when we met. She was like, I'm going to need you to prove to me that this marriage is not arranged and that it is legit. So I'm like, what do you need? Ask me. Of course, she asked to see the marriage certificate, which we gave her. And then she said, okay, can she see? And I'm like, what do you need? Do you want to see pictures? And she was like, oh yeah, sure, she wants to see pictures. So I scrolled through my phone and gave her the pictures. I'm like, oh, feel free to keep scrolling. You're going to see all my family members in there. And she was like, oh, that's so nice. So hypocritical, by the way. But anyways, she did all of that, and she was like, you're going to have to pay another $255. And I'm like, what? And she's like, oh yeah, because the $255 you paid for the online application is to IRCC. We are CBSA, so you're going to need to pay another $255. So that's why I said, try to go there to get it done in the first place, so that you don't pay twice. Because guess what? I paid $255 twice in the space of 1 week. Okay? So please go there and attempt to apply for the work permit right there first. And if that doesn't work, then do your online application at home. If you have $250 to spare, then go to the border and try to Flagpole again. Okay, so by the time she was done with that, she asked a couple of questions, and honestly, that was it. She didn't ask for medical, she didn't ask for all of that. I think initially she just didn't want to do it, and she was trying to prove difficult. But from what I gathered, if you have all of those documents and you go to the border, you have a high chance of getting your work permit approved without having an online application. I mean, that's what students, spouses of students do anyways, so it sort of makes sense. So spare yourself that $255 and actually just go there to apply, and hopefully you get it. But if that doesn't work out, you can apply for it online and go there to try to expedite it. Either ways, provided that this policy is still in place, there is no reason why your work permit shouldn't be approved that same day, provided that you have all of the requirements that they need. I mean, come to think of it, for you to have gotten spousal approval, right, they've done checks already when you submitted your applications, right? I mean, and that's why the policy did say that you must have first stage approval, and that's your SA, right, your spousal approval, okay, and your AOR. So if you have both these things, to an extent, it has passed the first level of check, and the officer has determined that you have the right documents to go ahead with this spousal sponsorship. So technically, I don't even think they should ask for too much, because she checked her laptop and she saw that we had a spousal application in view, and that we also had an open work permit application in view. Like I said, they can see everything. Okay, so if all of that requirements are satisfied, you are going to get your work permit that same day. Bear in mind that my husband got his own in 6 days of landing. Essentially, he landed on Wednesday, we went to Flagpole on Thursday, and he got his visitor visa converted to work permit on Thursday. Okay, so please do not keep your spouse in your home country waiting for your spousal application to be approved, when you can, in actual sense, bring them to the country now as a visitor and convert to open work permit even as early as 2 days after they land. When they've rested, go on Flagpole and get your work permit done in 1 day. So towards the end of the video now, in the next couple of seconds, you're going to see the journey. It's like a vlog of how everything went, so that you can see things that you are familiar with whenever you decide to go at Flagpole. Please note again that this was possible for us because the policy is still in place. So depending on whenever you're seeing this video, make sure that you do your findings, check if there's an active policy, that helps permanent residents that have a spousal application in view to change from visitors to open work permit. So it's important to add, right, that the key takeaway from all of this is that you should learn to stand your ground sometimes. Naturally, I wanted to walk away because I didn't want to gamble it. It was getting too heated. But my friend, whom I am honestly very grateful to, he insisted that he knew what he was saying. The policy is clear. He knows we're able to do it. And the good thing also about Canada is that the agents somewhat have customer service, right? And so they wanted to do their diligence to make sure that we were convinced beyond reasonable doubt that they couldn't do it. So in the process of their findings, they found that the policy was in place, and then they were able to do it. Like I said, it was also a good thing that all the policies about Canada is on Government of Canada's website. So I'm sure that is where they went to print whatever proof that they had to tell us that they couldn't do it, and then found that there is a new policy. Okay, so if you're convinced about something here and you're sure that it's backed with proof, try to stay on them. Okay, be insistent until they convince you beyond reasonable doubt that they cannot do it. And also, like they say, wisdom is profitable to direct. So if you evaluate the situation and it might not end well for you, please forget your conviction and flee. Okay, just run. But for the most part, try to get what you actually went there for. Okay, anyways, I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you can now apply for visa for your spouse and not just keep yourself apart from them for too long because you have no reason to. Okay, so thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe down below. Please give this video a thumbs up if you haven't, and I'll see you in the vlog. Bye. Basically, to get started, you put Rainbow Bridge on the map, so you could see Rainbow Bridge, Niagara, USA or Canada, but essentially that's what you want to put on the map. So this is us on our way to the border. Right, as you can see, it was rainy. It was like 3:30. Okay, at this time it was like 4:30 a.m. So everywhere was pretty empty. We also passed through Niagara Falls, the regular Niagara Falls. So we passed through that and we were on our way to the border. At this point we were like 6 minutes away from the border. Here we got to the toll-free area. As you can see, we were approaching the border. On the side you see the duty-free for those that were traveling around the border. And because it was early when we got there, not all the tolls were opened, as you would see in a couple of minutes. So this was when we approached the toll and en route the actual border, right? So it was just like a 2-minute stretch from the duty free to the border. So because it was pretty early,
not all the gates were open. So here we found one that was open and we're able to get through.
Everyone's passport, right?
Passport.
Huh?
Please, can you pause the music? Put some vegetables. So after I took our passports, he directed us to somewhere to park. So this is us parking, and we were walking all the way to the reception. As you can see, it was raining like crazy. I mean, the rain was falling since we left the house till we got there. So here we were directed to that point. As you can see, just follow the path if you're going to this same border. I don't think it's going to change before you go. So we're directed to somewhere to sit. So here you can also see buses that are going through the border, having to stop to go through the same checks as well. So here you see there are some buses from Canada going to the US. So this is what the reception looks like, and at this point we're not allowed to make a video anymore. So at this point we were done. It was daybreak, and our flag putting papers were ready. The officer, I don't know if you can see him on the corner, he directed us to the border gate. So there's a lot of turning around, but he's going to direct you, and then he's going to explain to you how to get to Canada border. And at this point you're still with the passport up until the gate is opened. Then after the gate is opened, he then gives you back your passport.
You're agreeing to give that to Canada just like that. Your passport's right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. As you can see, that is the flag pulling paper in white that is holding. It has all our passports in there, and now we are making our way to the Canadian border. We got to this pole, and apparently you're supposed to pay 5 USD or $6.50 Canadian dollars. And this is because we're driving. I think for the pedestrian bridge it is $2 or $1. I'm not sure. But we drove, and so this entire video is about if you're driving to the border. So as you can see, it's $6.50 for Canadian, and at this point we made our way to the Canada border. As you can see, we have the US flag and we have Canada flag, and we have a pole in between. So that is the meaning of flag pulling, and that is where the concept of flag pulling came about, okay, in case you were wondering. So at this point we were almost at the Canadian border. It was already 8 o'clock, so we can see a tiny bit of queue. I mean, how do you know you're in Canada if you don't see English and French? In the US you don't see English and French, but hey, welcome to Canada, you see both English and French. So at this point we were queuing to get into the border, and then we met the agent.
Hi. Okay. We're Flagpoling, so we are four in the vehicle.
So you went over there for like almost 3 hours. So what did you do while we were there?
We just waited. Yeah, just wait.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys heard the audio properly. It wasn't so loud, but essentially she was asking what we came here to do, and my friend replied that we were there to flagpole, and then she went ahead to ask what we had been doing since we got to the US border, because obviously she could see the timestamp somewhere, and we said we were just waiting. And then she asked a couple of questions I couldn't record at that point, and then afterwards she pointed us in this direction. There was like a canopy, and she told us to drive right in and park under the canopy. And then when we park, an agent was going to be right at the door to collect our documents. So after the agent collected our documents, she directed us to this waiting area. As you can see here, there's just a couple of chairs in there where you wait to be called upon. After all of the back and forth, like I explained in the beginning of the video, so this is what the work permit looks like. Finally, we got it. If you zoom in, you see the conditions, that you can see that it is an open work permit that is not tied to any employer, and we can also see the conditions with which it was granted. In this case, the condition is that application for permanent resident status has received initial approval. So after all of that, we decided to go to Tim Hortons to grab, a quick breakfast because we were starving and it has been a very long morning. So this is us on our way back home. And we've come to the end of this walkthrough slash documentary. I hope that you learned everything that you need to know concerning changing your visitor visa to an open work permit via the spousal route. If you enjoyed this video and you learned a thing or two, please consider subscribing to my channel and giving this video a thumbs up. See you in my next video. Bye bye.